Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Heartbeat of the Dance Floor. Today, I have a very special guest. Robbie Leslie has been performing on the international circuit for over 40 years. One of the last of the first generation of DJs, he began his nightlife career on Fire Island in 1975 and hasn't stopped spinning yet. He brings a wonderful perspective to our podcast because, in one way or another, he's been a part of every decade of dance music since. These days, you can hear Robbie coast to coast in North America on his weekly SiriusXM Studio 54 broadcasts of Robbie Leslie Presents and on Andy Cohen's KiKi Lounge, Channel 312. It brings me great pleasure to have as my guest the legend, the iconic disco master mixer himself, my dear, dear friend and brother from another mother, Mr. Robbie Leslie. Robbie, welcome to the Heartbeat of the Dance Floor.
Thank you, Marsha. How are you? Thanks for visiting me here at home.
I'm delighted to have you here. It's kind of like old home week. We sort of began our careers at about the same time and about the same place, and we've seen each other grow and change over the years. This is going to be fun. First, for anyone out there in our audience who doesn't know Robbie Leslie, I'm going to ask you to give us just a little bit of a background, just a quick jump start from then to now, and then we can dive into exactly what you feel heartbeats are and how it applies to the context that I'm trying to, describe in this podcast.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think you could call me a club kid before there was such a term. When I first started going to bars, there were, of course, jukeboxes. And I was absolutely fascinated with the music that we're playing. It was that danceable R&B of the early 70s that became disco over time and became refined and then fragmented and went in several different directions. But I just couldn't get enough of it. I'd be going out to clubs, 5-6 nights a week. And then, of course, the club scene became more specialized. And by then, I was working as a waiter, and I got hired to work on Fire Island as a waiter in a club, a restaurant that turned into a club after hours. So, I mean, how lucky was I to start working at one of I'd call it ground zero for disco, as far as testing out new music and having the best DJs, playing there out on Fire Island, being so close to New York City. And that's where I got my real serious start. Was being hired to work at Sandpiper, and that was 1975. So from there, it's all about choices and all about opportunities and where you go from point to point in your career and in just your life trajectory. So this was an amazing place to sort of as a springboard to start. And from there, of course, New York City came next with a few stop-offs here and there. And I guess you could say the rest is history. Most people know my pedigree, which is Studio 54 and 12 West and the Palladium and the Red Parrot and scads of other places, but just wonderful, wonderful experiences. And each new job, each new gig led to something better. And along the way, the music distinctly changed over time. And then, of course, into the 80s, and then in the 90s, and then crossing over into the new millennium, every decade was distinctly different. So I've been following it. I've been a part of it. And it still brings me great joy and satisfaction to be included in the nightlife scene. And now, of course, I'm virtual in that I'm on, satellite radio. So I'm not physically in a club necessarily, but still being heard. So it's a wonderful life I've had.
But you still do pop up here and there on special events and parties and guest appearances. So it may not be a club residency as we knew them back in the 80s.
Right.
Back in the day. I don't do clubs even do residencies anymore like they did back then?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, definitely. There aren't the big super clubs that we remember that we celebrate from those days. But yes, every city has nightlife and has dance palaces of some sort. And I do work a lot, mostly like special events now, and they're not regular residencies, but that's that's kind of more like what's going on these days. Big parties, as opposed to, everyone going out 3 or 4 nights a week to dance. Now it's more of a special occasion when they go out.
Yes, and as you know, I'm not as active in the nightlife world professionally as I once was, having my lighting career took me on a little bit of a left-hand turn into the architectural world, but that's neither here nor there to this point. This point being that I didn't know if not doing the nightlife world, if there really were, those followings of, as we did, on a Tuesday night, you would go to this club to hear so-and-so, and on a Thursday night, you would go to that club to hear so-and-so, or another club to hear another type of music, another musical genre. There were so many different things prevalent back then. I don't frequent the club scenes. Yes, I do go occasionally out. I'm not a complete wallflower or shut-in these days. But I don't know if they have those kinds of what I will jump to as what I'm calling a heartbeat, which is something that can come from a variety of places. It can come from the music. It can come from the interaction of the artistic and creative team. It can come from the venue itself, or it can come from the people. Hence, people who would maybe follow a certain type of music or a certain DJ. And in kind of segueing to what you've noticed and or describe as heartbeats that perhaps you have created. I mean, we know your functionality. It's to create the musical journey that we go to the event to hear, or to work collaboratively with other DJs if it's a multiple DJ event to hear. And the other aspects of what you feel may compromise that epitome of my definition of magic, which is when all of those events culminate and come together, and maybe how that's happened in one decade versus another decade might be an interesting, perspective. And I'm going to go back to some of our photo aids as we talk through the years and show our YouTube audience a little bit of what we've got going here. I'll replay again, as you were mentioning, the Sandpiper. This is out on Fire Island, hence the trees and the outdoorsy.
Yes.
It was just a wonderful place.
It was a great place, and it now where it stood is now a club called the Pavilion. So the footprint is still there, and it still is a nightclub.
Yes, indeed. The next club in the city that you were alluding to, and I don't know if this is your first in the city, but certainly has been a love. What a wonderful, wonderful establishment. Please tell us a little bit about what you think made 12 West so special.
Oh, very happily. First of all, let me preface the whole thing by saying, anyone who asks me what was my favorite club, no doubt about it, very quickly it was 12 West. And
really,
absolutely, no question. In spite of all these mega places that opened subsequent to 12 West, there was a purity about the club, and all the factors fit together like a puzzle, and all the pieces came together so perfectly. The crowd was really into the music. I mean, they were distinctly focused on a night of dancing. It wasn't about socializing necessarily, or hooking up with a stranger, going out, taking them home. The prime driver was dancing all night and hearing a great trip of music. Also, the location was good. It was down in the West Village, very easy to get to, and relatively safe. And additionally, the sound system, which was by Gray Bar, truly was magnificent. It was a very true sound. You could dance all night long, and you could leave, and your hearing really wouldn't be. You wouldn't have any, ringing or throbbing in your ears, or headache, or what have you, or sound loss. It was just that kind of a pure system. So everything came together. I loved working there, and I learned a ton because it was my first big New York City gig, and it was a residency. I was there until the Saint opened, but I might be getting a little ahead of myself. But the Saint, of course, closed 12 West, and also closed Flamingo, which were the two major all-night private clubs that were operating at that time.
And you, in your description of 12 West and just what a special place that holds. And the reasons why are so multifactual. That's exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about a heartbeat and what makes up a heartbeat. It's not just one thing. There's different levels. There's different I get levels of this perfection, if you will. 12 West was one of those places that always is very dear to my heart, and it was always a place where I knew without fail I could go to be lifted. I could be put in a beautiful space. There were never any bad nights there. Even if there were bad drugs, there were never any bad nights at 12 West. You were surrounded by an amazing family. It was a very, very special place.
And one of the great things about that club and all the other clubs that I subsequently worked at that I just want to drop in here is that not only was I a DJ there, but every one of them I would go out there dancing. Typically before I started working there, because after that I became too well known and people wouldn't let me alone. So I couldn't dance and just get lost in the music because everyone wanted to ask me questions or be close to me or, do whatever fans do. But being there as a dancer was absolutely unforgettable. And hearing other DJs play that room that I eventually would take over, and this applies to the studio and the Saint as well. I think you have a greater appreciation of being a DJ at any given venue if you were on the dance floor first and got to really feel and learn and get the total atmosphere of the place under your skin.
I would absolutely agree with that, and I would say that the same thing holds for lighting people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I will never forget, Mr. Mark Ackerman, a mentor of mine, and God rest his soul, one of the finest lighting people I've ever known to date. He said, "You really know the lights are good when you can see them with your eyes closed."
Oh, yes.
And that's only something you can do from the dance floor. And
right, for sure.
Know all of the technical aspects of it, but you've never been on the dance floor experiencing it. You're right. There's something missing in your trying to recreate that experience for others.
Yes. You really have to know it from both sides.
Yes. Indeed. Great point, Robbie. You brushed on 54, and I know you did have a time when you worked multiple clubs in Manhattan. The 80s were very prolific, and we've got a lovely picture of you here in the DJ booth at 54. On the far right is the DJ. You can see the record coming out of his right hand.
Right.
And on the left is all the lighting control systems.
Exactly. And that's a very good example of just how small that booth was. And you'll see all these pictures on the internet about, the DJ booth at Studio, crammed with celebrities. And believe me, it was a nightmare. It was just totally unpleasant for the DJ because you had to move your way around them to get to your records.
Oh my gosh. It was, and not only that, I remember when the confetti cannons would go off.
Yes.
If Roy was not ready for it, we'd be in the booth and you'd have to grab albums and fan them away and keep them off the turntables.
That's right. And you'd hold your hands above the turntable,
above the needle,
playing, to keep everything from dropping on the tone arm. Yeah.
Yes.
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment is right. And those Thorens turntables in the old days, those original ones, Roy used to carry extra rubber bands in his bag because they would always snap. And that's what held the suspension in the turntables so that if someone did kick the booth, it didn't jostle the needle. They were literally suspended on multiple rubber bands.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. All the little things, that we inside the booth remember that, are so funny because they're, back then it was pretty basic stuff. I mean, nothing was automated, especially with the light board. It was very analog,
everything, your sound was analog as well. Everything,
It was
there was no automation and any effects that you created by hand at that moment. It wasn't like you ran around with all of these these devices that were in studios. Studios use them all the time while making recordings, but they were not available like they are today in our digital world.
Correct. Oh, you can do almost anything in the booth now. Yeah.
You can. Although we were both very privileged to work at a club that did push the bar of design in, I think it opened in 81, the Red Parrot. And the Red Parrot had the first computerized lighting system by Kliegel Brothers. And if you look back at this picture and you see the word Kliegel on the left, same people, they created the first computerized lighting playback system that was digital, and it was used on Broadway. And our lighting designer from the Red Parrot was Ken Billington, who was a Broadway lighting designer, and he implemented that technology. And because the Red Parrot was also a sound stage, and we had live acts, and they had an in-house swing band orchestra, it was a proper musical sound stage, as opposed to having to bring in staging and microphones and equipment for a band that most venues had to do. This was built in. We had 2 sound engineers that were part of our running crew at night just for the live shows. So it was a very, very sophisticated discotheque, if you will, especially back in the day. Considering 81, I mean, there was nothing digital other than that computer, to my knowledge.
And fiber optics, as I recall, as well.
Fiber optics aren't digital, but yes, that was a cutting edge technology. And again, something that was more, it was a very cutting edge. We had a lot of incredible, wonderful technology, and it was a good marriage of proper theater and discotheque nightclub.
Disco dancing. And may I add that was one of the first residencies that I had where we got to work together every week. And so even though our careers have been paralleling and crisscrossing for many years prior, this was like the first time where dependably we were together every single week.
For a few years, yes, and it was wonderful. And we and the Red Parrot was an offshoot of Jimmy Merry, who was going to be the subject of one of my future podcasts. Bobby Grecki has agreed to be my guest, and he's worked with Jimmy since the late 60s or early 70s.
Right.
This is our crew. We were all family, and I'll go from left, hiding behind the floral arrangement, seated as Michael Fearman, another DJ. Standing behind him is Michael Hart, one of the managers from the Red Parrot. To his right, Jimmy.
That's me behind him.
Oh my goodness gracious, you're right. That is you. Yep. My dear, look at you and Michael. You look so similar in that photo. Well, that's Robbie, and this photo was taken in their garden at their apartment on the Upper West Side as they hosted a lovely dinner party for us. Right. So I'm seated on the other side of the floral arrangement, and behind me in the striped shirt is Jimmy Pisano, one of the managers. To my left is Michael Hart in the blue shirt, who is another one of the managers, and Bobby Grecki in the striped polo is the other manager. And sadly, the only one of the 3 managers who is still with us today. So we're very grateful to have him come on board and get down this history of Jimmy Murray, who in and of himself changed in many ways the New York nightlife scene from the 70s.
Yeah.
And one more fun
show. I'm looking forward to that.
One more fun pick before we go away. Robbie and I did a New Year's Eve together.
Oh, yes.
And this was from our wonderful New Year's Eve. We both
That's at the Red Parrot, yes.
Decided to dress it up, indeed. Right. And back then, the Red Parrot had a lady who used to go around very 40s style with a cigarette tray and sell cigarettes, which, of course, was legal to smoke in New York then. And then there was a photographer who took photographs of people with her Polaroid, and that was her concession. Yeah. And it was kind of a throwback, to the 40s nightclubs, if you will.
The swing band.
In many ways, yes, sure. Indeed. That was fun. That was it
was wonderful working there. It really was. It was great.
It really was. And then we have worked together sporadically at many other venues over the years. That was the only residency. And it was wonderful. It was a great family. It was a great place to work.
It was. But you're forgetting that other big club we worked at together.
We worked at many other big clubs. But shall I move on to this big club?
Yes, that's the one.
That was the biggest of the big, I think. The Palladium. We did mention briefly the Pavilion, and we worked there together as well.
Correct.
But the Palladium was the biggest of the big, and
it was amazing. If you look at that picture that's up on screen right now, and you look halfway up behind the television monitors on the left side. That whole second story, the second floor, was lighting and sound and videos. It was enormously sophisticated. It was very spacious, very comfortable, a great place to work. It had a Richard Long sound system. Marsha can tell you about the lighting, but it was state of the art. It was fantastic.
It was very state of the art. The lighting offered Verilights, which to that point had only been used on rock and roll tours. They were only used as rentals. You could not purchase the lights. We had a 25-year lease on the fixtures. There were 72, I believe, when the club opened. And it was the only permanent installation of these lights anywhere in the world at that moment. The lights were invented a few years earlier, created for a Genesis show that began in Barcelona, I think in 81 or 82. And that's when these three guys in Texas were tasked to create a really cool effect for the Genesis show. And they put some moving scroller technology together with some robotic technology, together with some wheels and widgets and gadgets, and came up with this first robotic lighting fixture.
Yes, well, they did a very good job.
And the company and this lighting fixture really turned everyone on its ear from a lighting perspective, because you can't look anywhere on any show these days that doesn't have a moving head fixture that is a color changing fixture that's all in one. Prior to that, I'll go back to the Palladium picture for a second, and you can see on the very top above the Keith Haring a row of dots, and those were traditional lights. Up to that point, you had a light, you put a color in it, and that was it. Bada bing, bada bang. It didn't change. You wanted 4 colors, you needed 4 lights.
Right. If you wanted to change the color, you had to do it when the club was closed and lower the lights and change the gel on it, and there you go.
And if you wanted red, green, purple, and blue, you needed to have 4 lights. Right. And if you wanted more than 4 lights in your show, you needed to take however many lights it caused you to create. Maybe it took you 20 lights to make this in one color, so you now needed 80 lights to do 4 colors. So on and on. Anyway, yes, this was really the one club that I think defined us going from the analog to the digital world. Yes. I really do believe this is the club that was that line of demarcation.
Yes, I agree with you. Even though it was opened in the 80s, it really was something for the new millennium as far as groundbreaking and just a new generation.
Indeed, and they could see what was possible. And even though, as you say, it didn't come about until years later to be commonplace,
yes,
they definitely could see what was possible. And I think that, kudos to anyone who pushes the envelope, who does something that no one's thought of being able to do before and does it successfully. Kudos to them. That's how we get great art. That's how we make progress in our world, I think in humanity and scientifically.
Pushing the envelope, just trying new things, experimenting. Yeah, they're the pioneers. They're the ones that bring us forward.
Indeed. But all good things do need to ultimately come to a close. And during that time, you mentioned very briefly the Saint. We spoke about the Saint as a mega club. Certainly, it has so many. In fact, Peter Spar, who was one of the engineers of the perfect sound system at 12 West, was the sound designer and engineer at the Saint.
Correct.
There were so many incredible aspects that made that club a phenomena. And in and of itself, I'm sure also had it had many heartbeats, and they changed over the years. They changed from the first year. I don't believe, I'll let you tell the story. I believe you started second season.
No, I started the first year. I played Christmas.
Tea dances, yes.
Yeah. So that was pretty much the same time that I left 12 West, because business dropped off so precipitously. They could only keep one DJ as a resident. So they kept Jimmy Evangelista because he had seniority. But by letting me go, they actually did me a great service by opening up my availability. And I was hired at the Saint. And it was, just to say that it was mind-blowing is an understatement. It was basically one man's dream made real. And anything you can think of, it was made, into 3D reality. Everything, the light show, the Star Machine, of course, the planetarium dome, the size of the place, just the policies that they adhered to as far as how late they would stay open, and no cameras, and so many little things and details that made it the special place it was. And of course, as you said, all things do come to an end. Unfortunately, the health crisis in New York and around the world had pretty much decimated the private membership of the club, to the point where the writing was on the wall, and the owner, Bruce Mailman, decided, instead of letting this dwindle to nothing, to go out with a bang. And that was in spring of '88.
And I'm just going to throw in there also, in a couple of years prior to the Saint closing, and we're talking about the building that was the club at the location at Fillmore East, 105 2nd Avenue in Manhattan.
Yes.
That also began, they began having outside events in order to try to keep the space open, which I think ultimately led to Bruce's decision, rather than have a slow death. They would bring in promoters. They did. I know Steve Gold did a few nights. Mm-hmm. He was also our manager at the Palladium at the time.
Right.
So I think that in no small way that led to Bruce's decision to dignify what we had at the Saint. It was so special. And I was.
Yeah, it's a nice choice of word. Yeah.
And I think he chose to dignify it with a graceful closing, mm-hmm. and then move on to the next venture, which was him doing the Saint at Large parties that occurred. That's another topic. I believe that in no small way kicked off a lot of the circuit party events and things that really began to rise in the 90s all over the country and all over the world ultimately. But let's backtrack a minute to what was the year of the last party. Was it 88?
1988, April 30th to May 1st, I guess, something like that.
A 3-day party that ingratiated
10 DJs, 10 of the most prominent and popular DJs still living, played in 4-hour blocks. And there, what you're seeing now is the closing night poster. The Saint sent, instead of invitations, they would send posters for all their major parties. And the artwork was just amazing. They would hire, they had Robert Mapplethorpe do a couple posters, and Rex did a couple posters as well. But it's all just incredibly creative stuff that they would put out. So this was the closing night poster. The list at the bottom were the DJs, the entertainment, and the lighting, people who stood at equal footing and equal respect, especially in that club, where the lighting tech was just as respected and appreciated for their job at the end of the night as the DJs were.
I think that it was one of the few places that elevated the lighting person to having its own platform. And in my humble opinion, the reason of that was the first year they offered the classical hour.
Yes.
And during the classical hour, it wasn't that the DJ didn't play music. The DJ did play music, but the lighting person was the focal point, because people would literally come to lie down on the floor and look up at the dome as though they were in a night sky, mm-hmm. and watch the choreography of the lighting as it went to the classical music. And it was, I think, one of the first times that the lighting person was really elevated to the level of being an artist. The light show wasn't the gimmickry. It wasn't the pageantry. It wasn't the drops going in and out at 54 or at the Palladium that had the execution and choreography of the night. It was the artistry of the moment and what the lighting person did to accompany the music.
Right. And let me just add there that it wasn't just the first year. In fact, I did classical hour until I left the Saint at the end of '86. And in fact, I closed the Saint in '88 with an hour of classical music at the very end, since I was the last DJ to play there. So yes, that was a very important part. And all of you guys, Mark Ackerman, yourself, Richard Erskine, Richard Tucker, Jim Hicks, and I apologize for those that I've not named, Tony Lumen and Tony DeVizia. They, in their own rights, were all talented, and it was great fun to see how they would interpret and light some of these wonderful orchestral pieces of music.
Yeah, it's it's a different it's a different form of lighting, and the sound system at the Saint was also very classically tuned. There was a sweet spot that was perfection.
Better than a concert hall, better than Carnegie Hall.
It was, and for a few years there, I worked with Peter Spar and Entertech, and we used to go in and tech the sound system. And also in doing installations that were new installations, I was always amazed at Peter's ear, because there's a tool that's used when you're establishing the parameters of a sound system and tuning it up, if you will.
Yes.
And it's a thing called white noise.
Yes, right, correct.
And it's calculation, and it's done with a machine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Peter would always tune the room to his ear, and he would check it with the white noise meter to see if he needed to make any adjustments. And more times than not, he didn't. He was as good as the damn meter.
Right.
You know,
and that was the strangest thing. I mean, it was ear splitting, because I was there for several tests, not only there, but at the Sandpiper and a couple other venues. And it was like, it sounded like static to my ears. And it was just like, what is he doing? And yet he could hear something that I couldn't. And that was his genius.
He had an amazing sense of hearing. He really did. You know, look, it was a cast of characters that were each in and of their own right amazing. You know, Charles Terrell, the set designer from La Mama Theater, a Broadway background, Mark Ackerman, who was one of the most incredible lighting people ever had. Also a natural gift. Some could think that color blindness is a handicap if you're a lighting person. In Mark's case,
Mark was colorblind?
Mark was colorblind, or rather I'll say color sensitive to blues. And what that allowed was that he saw intensities of light better than anyone else. It was this filter that God had given him to measure intensity. People walk around with foot candle meters to meter the light, to look at it, to make sure that everything is even. You know, it's a tool like a white noise meter. So where Peter had the white noise meter in his ears, Mark had a foot candle meter in his eyes. It was really quite
fascinating. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
And a little trivia for those of you who like that type of thing. One of Mark's favorite colors was Congo blue. And that is a beautiful, deep blue that almost borders on ultraviolet. It's a lovely color. And he used to use that prominently in some of his lighting setups at the Saint.
Actually, that was both of our favorite colors.
There you go.
Mark guided me, and I don't think if he had not given me the go ahead when I was asked to do the lighting design at the Pines Pavilion, when the first permanent installation was put in, when the first system was put in, I don't think I would have done it. He was a great friend. He was a great mentor. He was a great artist, and really a great supporter of me in my early career. Clearly, I was grateful and blessed that he saw something in me that I was able to share with him years later, after he had moved to Boston. I'll throw this personal thing in, and then I'll move back to topic. But shortly, I would say maybe a year or two before we lost Mark, God rest his soul, he had come to New York, and we all hung out and visited like the old days. And it was after I had just done lights at Radio City Music Hall for Misha Paris, who was the opening act for Ashford and Simpson. And it was so wonderful, after a lapse of, maybe 10 years after we first met, to say, hey, this is what your guidance led me to at this point. And it was just so wonderful to be able to share that with him in one of the last times that we were together. So
that is a wonderful thing and a wonderful memory. Yeah. And I was there for that show. Yeah.
Indeed. Yes, you were. Okay. So I'm going to get back to Heartbeats. And I'm going to ask if you have any little stories or snippets or memories as we've gone through the decades. I mean, pull them from anywhere you choose, but I know you've had so many wonderful experiences, both in this country, various cities, internationally, over the decades. In your mind, as you think of what makes a heartbeat, is there examples or stories from various parties or experiences that you'd like to share with us?
I would love to. First of all, I've done a lot of thinking about before this interview about what I consider to be the heartbeat of the dance floor. And since you and I shared in naming, coining the name, it's very dear to me. So I think about the human body, and of course, the heartbeat is the heart, and it is a muscle, and it's right in the middle of the body. And so what do I see? How do I see a dance floor, like transposed to a human body? And as I see it, the heartbeat is specifically, it's the energy generated by the people dancing on the floor. Now, to take that a bit further, you can have a human has a brain, and they have limbs, and they have their immune system and all these other specific organs and systems. The brain I see as like your sound system, your lighting design, and let's say the something else could be the design of the space or the concept of a particular event that's a one-off event. But nothing functions without people dancing and having a great time on the dance floor. Everything else is secondary. So as I see it, the heartbeat of the dance floor is generated by the crowd that comes. If the crowd doesn't come, you can have the most spectacular venue, the most magnificent party, and you have a corpse. You have a non-functioning human or body. So as I see it, the heartbeat of the dance floor is that energy created by people coming together to dance and celebrate. And it could be 10 people, it could be 10,000 people, but it's got to be cohesive. It's got to be of one mind. And that's what makes nights unforgettable, especially from the DJ booth for the lighting and sound, people. So that's my take on what the heartbeat of the dance floor really is, at least to me. And it's that wonderful energy generated on the floor when everything is working as almost one organism. And it's a remarkable thing to be up in the booth above everybody, looking down upon it. It's so supernatural, I guess is a good way to describe it. And those things have happened I'm happy to say, at all the places I've worked at. The Sandpiper, when I was cutting my teeth and learning and making mistakes, but at the same time was being encouraged, and the crowd coming together and being so supportive. And one little thing I remember is after a particularly good night, I used to always go to the beach during the day because the club was closed, and working there at night, I had the days off. And coming down to the beach, and like everybody around started clapping. And I mean, it came so unexpectedly, and it just completely blew me away. But it was that kind of, like a community feeling that they were genuinely proud of what I'd done the night before. Jumping up to 12 West, if I had not landed that job and met Tony Martino and Alan Harris, I think my whole future would have been different, because they taught me so much about the reality of playing a big room and playing to very, very large crowds. They taught me to be humble and to be grounded and not to take myself too seriously. And also the people dancing there at 12 West, when you did a fine job or even a fine mix or a fine blend or just a great choice of songs, their response was so immediate and so enthusiastic that those little moments are locked into my brain and my memory. Studio 54, of course, was the Glamourpuss job, and I was very happy to have it. I didn't enjoy it while it was happening, to be perfectly honest. I found it very stressful. And again, as I said, the DJ booth was like a train station with people coming and going, and it was exceedingly loud up there in the booth. Yes. But we rallied, and made some incredible nights, and it was a great view. The DJ booth was probably the best view in the house, really was. And I loved dancing there as much as I loved spinning there, and it was a terrific place. Of course, working with you, Marsha, at the Red Parrot and Palladium was golden, because those places were so state of the art for their period. They were just, just magical places, and magical, every which way you look at it. And we have personal memories that just are so intimate and so unforgettable.
It's true. We had fun also, and I think that
absolutely,
in many ways, I mean, I've done lights for a lot of people, and when you're doing it with someone who you know so well, or someone whose music you know so well, that just puts another level of a nuance into it, and it makes it easy to read someone else. You can easily anticipate what the move is, because even with just a look or a twitch or a wink, I would know what your next move was. It was this spoken communication that you had with special friends. So
that's a dynamic. Yeah, that's a dynamic we definitely had, because we had such a history together, and we were kindred spirits, like you said, brother and sister from different mothers. So that says it all.
Indeed.
But we knew each other intimately. We really did. We still do. We can second guess each other. So working together in tandem like that was so fine and so wonderful.
It was, and we met long before I even thought about doing lighting, and we met when I first began in my music career. So by the time I started punching buttons in lights, we already had a well-established friendship going on. So,
correct. And that's a great way to start. Yeah, having a little foundation there.
Oh, yeah. Although I must say, sharing much of the nightclub history and with various clubs and owners, and each club did represent a certain family in a way. And if you were part of what made that venue tick, if you will, you were part of a family, you were part of a very special family.
Absolutely.
It was the only one you were part of, but you were certainly part of a very special family.
That's right. And that was the management, the lighting, the tech people, the resident DJs that were, there were at least, because these places were many times 7-night operations. So you'd have a good number of DJs and lighting people on staff. So yes, it was like a clan or a family or a tribe, each different venue.
Indeed, and sometimes the same venue would host different events. I mean, at both the Red Parrot and the Palladium, we had famously Thursday nights were Latin nights for many, many years.
Right,
and that
whole different thing. Yeah, sure.
Whole different kettle of fish, if you will.
Right,
and wonderful. Right. Oh my gosh,
kettle of I'm trying
to mangoes.
There you go. There you do anticipate me. See that?
I have such wonderful memories from working with so many fantastic Latin artists over the years through both of those clubs. Yeah. And as we've both been privileged to have our work take us down some incredible roads. Your road has moved more from live performance, which I think you do more as a special item, into your now very prolific serious career, which, please tell us, it's expanded recently into the Andy Cohen's shows as well.
Sure. Well, let me jump back a little bit and say, first of all, because of the pandemic, I was very fortunate because my revenue stream was not interrupted. Now, the Brooklyn Museum mounted an amazing exhibition that you were part of, Marsha, and
we worked together on the soundtrack. Exactly.
That's correct. But I was going to play the opening party, and that was the very first of quite a few bookings that completely evaporated at the beginning.
Exactly. In fact, I was in New York for a preview opening of the Brooklyn Museum exhibit on the 11th of March. And on the 12th, the city shut down, and the exhibit did not open until the September, I believe, of 2020.
Yeah.
And Rob, I was also asked to provide the ambient music soundtrack, which Robbie collaborated with me and the museum on. And in the 3 rooms of the exhibit are special mixes that were compiled by Robbie, and they are on tour with the exhibit now, which is in Dortmund, Germany.
Oh, it is. I hope that somehow, some way, someplace, sometime, I'll get to see the.
I am hoping that if it does not get back to New York, at least it goes to a city like Los Angeles or maybe even Florida. I mean, we do have decent museums in Florida these days, so I'm hoping it will travel. Believe me, I will tell you when it's around. The best that we've had, neither of us have really. I saw the exhibit at the preview, the VIP party, and ran through it, but I wouldn't say that I saw the exhibit in its entirety, and it is wonderful. And that was the beginning of the lockdown, the 12th, 13th of March, and the opening party. You were supposed to come up and do that, days later, practically.
That's correct. That Friday, yeah. So, getting back yes, my serious engagement and my job with them was every Friday and continues to be, and I'll be celebrating 10 years coming up in 2022, in the spring of 2022. So it's been quite a long time, and I've never had a residency, a DJ residency that lasted 10 years.
We must be doing
something rare.
And this is a screenshot we've got up of Robbie's byline on Sirius as it appears on your radio dial.
Correct.
This looks like the car radio dial.
That's right. That's channel 54. And during the pandemic, Andy Cohen, who I've never met, but I know him by reputation, apparently when he was under lockdown, he was like finding my music on Spotify and Mixcloud and whatnot. And apparently he found out, by, I guess there's some app that will tell you how many hours you've listened to such and such a person or such and such an artist. And so I apparently was the most listened to artist. So when he launched his own channel, which is called the KiKi Lounge on channel 312, his assistant contacted me up in Maine and said, we'd like you to have a weekly show. So I do Thursdays on channel 312. And the nice thing about that is it's a 3-hour block. So instead of just being an hour show when you just kind of put your toe in the water, this is a nice full set to really kind of let the DJ express himself more fully.
Nice. Yeah. And thanks to the advent of digital recording, you do not need a room full of sound equipment to do this.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it truly is. I mean, I've actually learned how to do digital editing myself, and it kind of boggles the mind. And for those of you that aren't old like me, we used to have to edit with an editing block, a razor blade, and pieces of tape. And you would have pieces of tape everywhere to try to keep track of them.
Yes. Right. It's a wonderful thing. And the great thing is I still mix intuitively and by, just by feeling when I'm doing these sets. And yeah, I'm using basically my roots. I'm relying on my roots as a club DJ, putting these shows together. So it's still a great experience to forge a set and finish it up and polish it off and get it ready to air.
Well, I think that your foundation roots are guiding you well, because it is about the feeling. It is about the musical journey. I mean, I know I keep saying the same thing over again, but it really is so much in part. Without the appropriate musical journey, you don't really get the appropriate response from the crowd that you were describing, which really is the heartbeat. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And without that communication between the two, if you have somebody who's just up there playing music that they want to hear and they're ignoring the crowd, you're not going to get that heartbeat either. Exactly. Right. And to be able to take that skill set and then transcend it to essentially an empty room, you're making for broadcast for the radio. How do you know? You get no feedback. It's like the same thing that I hear from many of my my live events friends. The artists get no feedback. The artists are going bonkers because they're playing to themselves. They need the audience, and the audience needs the artist.
Oh, yeah, it's very symbiotic. Absolutely. Yes. And while we're on the subject of disco, which I guess this is all about,
more or less,
I am absolutely over the moon, and I want to drop this in as some promotion. Next year in the spring, I'm going to be the DJ on board. It's called the Ultimate Disco Cruise. And if you have any interest in a cruise that is absolutely immersed in disco from beginning to end, with original artists and acts like Casey and the Sunshine Band and the Spinners and the Stylistics and A Taste of Honey and Thelma Houston, and the list goes on. I think there are about 40 acts, but it's called ultimatediscocruise.com, and I would love to see you on board. It's going to be incredible. I cannot wait to do it. This is going to be one of those like once in a lifetime gigs that I just can't wait to do.
I've got your banner running along the bottom so people can find you on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. Right. And I'm sure you'll be posting links up on your social media. So if people want to get more information on this incredible disco cruise that's upcoming, please do visit Robbie on his social media. I will also have some links up on our page, on our website when we post this, and certainly linking into Robbie's sites. And we can put a link up to the disco cruise as well, if you like, Robbie.
Thank you. That'll be fantastic. Yeah, I think this is one not to miss. And this is not just shameless self-promotion, which it is, but also
You're allowed.
This is sincere, that I think this is going to be one for the record books for sure.
Well, it's really nice to see how the world has embraced the music and the culture that we grew up with, that we love so much. And it was fun. It's been fun. And I look forward to many more of these events as time goes on. But it's been fun to do some things with you at Sirius. Here's a cool picture of a town hall we did a couple of years ago.
Right. There we are.
Where I moderated, and we had Robbie and Bobby Vitoriti, who's most known for his West Coast Trocadero Transfer DJ, and Sharon White, and God rest his soul, recently departed Tony Smith. And Tony Smith, I'm very glad that they still do keep his show going. And what a wonderful, wonderful artist. It hurts when people that essentially you've grown up with,
right,
in the biz.
Yeah.
We've
lost too many, of course.
We have indeed. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you as my guest on this show today. Absolutely a delight. We know where we can find you. We've got My Runner running. You can certainly find all of the links on our website. Here's Robbie's Runner again. You can find, all of the links on his social media places, and also RobbieLeslie.com.
Right, correct.
Your website still, yes, sir. And we certainly hope to have you back again as another guest as we expound on various other aspects of how we define a heartbeat. But, you really did hit the nail on the head. And I know that a lot of this idea came from conversations we had a couple of years ago.
Absolutely.
And it really is just so much more encompassing than just the music.
For sure.
Or just the place. There's so many different components and so many different aspects. And what I'm trying to show in this podcast is how many different ways you can achieve that same goal.
Right.
Of having magic, of having the perfection of a pure heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And in many genres. I believe it exists in every genre.
Sure.
It is wonderful to see that the world has embraced the music that we love, and we continue to put it forward. And please rock on, keep making that music, keep making those happy sounds.
You bet.
I thank you very much, Robbie.
Thank you, Marsha. It's been great. It's been wonderful.
We look forward to the next time, my friend.
Bye now, honey.
For now, we say bye-bye from Heartbeat of the Dance Floor.
Bye now.